Exactly. All right. 2 truths and a tie. The Big Ten. Oregon and Ohio State will play at least twice this season. Nebraska at Iowa will have college football playoff implications. USC will finish above 500 in Big Ten play. Ty Hildenbrandt.
Yeah.
2 truths and a tie. Which one's the tie?
Yeah, the lie is that Nebraska at Iowa will have playoff implications. And I know it pains me to say that. I apologize. But I really like Oregon and Ohio State. No great secret there. I don't even think that's a take. I think USC ultimately finishes 5 or 6 conference wins. I'm not crazy about USC, but I give them a little bit more credit than maybe some others out there. I just can't get to a place where we're sitting here on November the 29th and one of either Iowa or Nebraska is in serious playoff contention. I do think Iowa will be on the edge of that conversation, but it's a question of offense. It's a question of offense, no matter how many things Tim Lester has said in the offseason that has given us warm fuzzies and at least led us to believe that, yes, this is a guy who understands what needs to happen next in order to just move some things forward. I still think we're going to encounter these situations where we're banging our head against the wall. Iowa's offense is still not good enough to kind of get them over the hump. And especially now that it's a more crowded conference, I just think it's harder to find a pathway into that playoff if you're a team like Iowa, even with what I think looks like a fairly decent schedule. So unfortunately, for as much as I'd like to say it's not the lie, not the tie, I think
which is confusing. We're saying TY, not TIE, to be clear.
That's correct. Yeah, I would say that Nebraska,
especially with Iowa,
is the lie.
It becomes confusing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because they're the ones that would lobby the NCAA to reinstate ties and get rid of overtime. That's a very Iowa way of thinking.
Okay, so I'm going to clarify something and be, again, pedantic. So when you say Nebraska and Iowa has playoff implications, there's 2 ways to interpret that. One way is one of those teams will be on the precipice, on the fringe of playoff consideration, or within the top 12 when they play and maybe fall out. The other way is that these could be data points for playoff teams that
I hadn't thought of it that way. I think we're going more the straightforward primary. One of these teams is in the mix.
Okay. I was going to say that, that if you're looking at Ohio State's resume, that if Iowa loses to Nebraska, then that Iowa win doesn't look as good for Ohio State if they're being considered as an at-large team kind of thing. So I was going with the who was it? Pitt? That was squarely in the middle of all these different teams had played Pitt way back when we were considering.
Yeah, I think that's maybe a little too deep because
I know.
I don't know that it's gonna. If neither of them is in the mix for the playoff berth, I don't know it's gonna matter that much what everybody did against them.
I agree with you, but you know how this sport operates in November.
I do.
Where we're suddenly parsing every single moment.
They both played Oregon State, right?
Exactly. They won by 14. Yeah. The other team didn't have control. They only won by 7. And but that's the conversation. That's the weird sport that we all love and follow. So I'm going to say that as well, just because if you're going to say, we're going to consider a team with a true freshman quarterback who I think is going to look great at times, but I still think we'll have a flawed offense also at times. And you got to see it to believe it with Iowa's offense at the same time. And look, they've been top 12. They've been around there these past few years at times. But I think USC has enough now, especially on defense, adding a couple key Oregon State transfers, I think at linebacker and safety. There is something nice about having the receivers that they have. I still have some offensive line questions about them, but I think they can win more often than not with pop on offense in the Big Ten and some improvement on defense that they can go above 500.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with believing that Iowa could be part of this conversation is that you need to suspend reality and start believing that their offense is going to get better. And for me, I was drawing the comparison earlier when I was in the shower. I'm like, this is a lot like believing in UFOs, Andy, because we've got old evidence, strong evidence to suggest that, yes, it is real. It can be real. But with the wonders of modern technology, we need better 4K video.
Yes.
We need more serious people to also believe that this is a real thing. until we actually see what Tim Lester does, and if Cade McNamara can hopefully do better this season than he did in his own scrimmage, I'm going to remain in a healthy, skeptical place and hopefully get to a point by the end of the year where we're talking about this whole thing in a different light.
Ty wants forensic burden of proof with the Iowa offense.
I understand that. It's kind of the way I feel about USC's defense.
Sure.
Like I need to see it. I've never seen a Lincoln Riley team with a good defense. The closest it came is 2020 at Oklahoma, and I think we've learned enough now to know that nothing that happened in 2020 counts. So we got to see that from him. But I will say, so I'm going to pick a different one than you guys, but it's not. I'm not saying that USC will finish above 500 in Big Ten play as a lie.
Okay.
I think that can be true because USC can go 6-6 and still be 5-4 in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Their Big Ten schedule is actually somewhat manageable. They do have to play Michigan and Penn State, which is going to suck. But LSU and Notre Dame, I think, are more likely losses than anything on their Big Ten schedule other than Michigan game. So I think there's a chance they go 1-2 in the non-con, 5-4 in the Big Ten, and they're 6-6, and everybody's still mad. Or they could be 7-5, or they could be 8-4. I don't necessarily think they're going to be very good this year in the Big Ten, but the non-con is where they can take 2 losses. So I'm going to say that's not the lie. I'm going to say the lie is Oregon and Ohio State will play at least twice this season, which requires Nebraska and Iowa having college football playoff implications to be true. Producer River, please throw that Iowa schedule up on the screen.
So great. It is a great
Let's
schedule.
go through this. So yes, there's at Ohio State. We're counting that as a loss. Iowa may be favored in every other Big Ten game.
Mm-hmm.
Every other Big Ten game. So as long as they beat Iowa State and don't, drop one to Troy or Illinois State, then you are talking about a team that could be 11-1 or 10-2 at the end of the season and playing in the Big Ten championship game. If they could be playing Nebraska for a spot in the Big Ten championship game because they could be 8-1 with a loss to Ohio State in Big Ten play.
Sure.
Oregon could be 8-1 with a loss to Ohio State in Big Ten play. Or Oregon could have beaten Ohio State, could have the head-to-head against Ohio State. And maybe Ohio State.
Else.
Yeah. That's the thing.
You could have a weird three-way tie situation.
You have a three-way tie. How do you break the tie? Like, there's so many strains. We haven't even seen the tiebreakers yet. Like, the Big Ten and SEC still have not given us those tiebreakers yet. So I do think there's a possibility that Nebraska-Iowa is either Iowa trying to get an at-large or Iowa trying to get into the Big Ten title game or at least get into the tiebreaker for the Big Ten title game. So if that happens and Iowa gets into the Big Ten title game, then we don't get a second Oregon-Ohio State in the Big Ten title game. Now, we might get it in the playoff, but I'd say there's less of a chance of that than in the title game. So this is we've already got some disagreement.
Yeah. And look, Iowa always loses to Northwestern, right? We know that.
Yep.
And that might have been a Pat Fitzgerald thing. He held the weird thing against Iowa.
But speaking of Northwestern and Iowa,
sure.
We mentioned Cade McNamara bad in the scrimmage.
Yeah.
Brendan Sullivan maybe Iowa's quarterback.
Yeah.
We don't know that.
Yeah, so there's that. Iowa's just going to lose something dumb or a couple things dumb in the Big Ten and still might have a crazy strong defense and lose, what was it, 12-10? Something like that to Minnesota last year. And Ty's very high on Minnesota this year. Ty's very high.
I am. I'm
Darius Taylor, baby.
Minnesota.
Yeah.
Yep.
Max Brosmer. New Hampshire transfer. Love it.
We have a saying on our show, Andy, that I clunkily started up that
horrible.
This is the year of bros before nose.
I hate it.
And by that, I mean, we need to see what Max Brosmer can do in that Minnesota offense, hopefully revitalize passing attack before we default to the nose of the past. Like we saw last year, right? They were going to build up the passing game before you know it. They ran the ball like 62% of the time. They were a very run-heavy offense. So I want to see Max Brosmer before I default to the
Ask
nose
Ty
of the
how
past.
he would feel if an FCS transfer were starting for Notre Dame, right? As long as it's for your team.
We're not here to talk
mine.
about the past. We're here to talk about the future.
It is a very sneaky, great Thursday week 1 game.
Yes.
North Carolina at Minnesota. Very excited to watch that game. Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, Subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples on 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.